Good morning, Rotarians and guests. I'm Ron Strobel with Sergeant at Arms. Our invocation this morning is by Bill Woolridge.
Ron, I'm going to do it here, because I'll never get up there. Is this one on all right? Good, okay. Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, let us remember our brother and Rotary member Joe, whom we lost last week. Let's keep in mind all those in Ukraine who are suffering such a terrible war. And we want to thank you for our city, our state, and the country, which we are so fortunate to live in. Help us to go out and serve above self in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Bill. And lead us in the pledge and the four-way test. Catherine Symes, back from the deep waters.
Good morning, Rotarians. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? 3, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And 4, will it be beneficial to all concerned? It's good to see everyone's smiling face.
Thank you, Catherine. And now our president, Pat Shearer.
Thank you, Ron. We have a busy morning today, so I just want to get started and get into our announcements. Our opening quote: "We shape our buildings, thereafter our buildings shape us." Winston Churchill. As Bill mentioned earlier, Joe Zapatowski passed away this past week, so let's take a moment of silence in honor of Joe. Joe's services are going to be next week, Tuesday at St. Mary's. We don't know any of the particulars yet, but it sounds like it'll be for sure next week, Tuesday. On Saturday, the Manitowoc, we did our annual cleaning of the Manitowoc pool in the shower house area. Special thanks to Ed Sogan, Ron Strobel, Marilyn Orr, Keith Veers, and Rich Warfield for being there and getting the area all polished up for another year of scouts to being able to use. There's not going to be a club board meeting today, so make sure nobody sticks around for that. The annual End Polio Night at Progressive Field is Wednesday, July 13th at 6:00 p.m. The Guardians will take on the Chicago White Sox. Tickets are available through the Rotary 6630 website or on our club website. So if you're interested in going to a baseball game and helping to eradicate polio from the planet, that's a great opportunity for you to be able to do that. Please, I want people to save the evening of August 12th and the afternoon and evening of August 13th for the Hudson Beer Garden. Our club's been asked to do our hot dog and bratwurst stand at the beer garden. So please save one of those 2 evenings and to help us out for that opportunity. Hot dogs and brats, yep, exactly. June 29th is our Change Into the Guard dinner. I have a sign-up form that I'll be sending around through the group. If you're interested in signing up, please do so. Kelly Brennan wants to give us an update on the Scout Cabin project.
Challenges.
Okay. Just left me hanging, that's all.
Not gonna be the last time.
Only 2 more weeks to do that.
No, that's a lifelong enterprise.
Are you gonna do it from down there?
I am. but
Okay.
We're gonna see. We may have to kick this back to next week.
So, sorry, we didn't have a chance to try it out before the meeting, so
All right.
I'm trying to get it set up now, but it's not showing up on the.
Yes. All right, so I can go over more stuff. Dave, right behind you is the clipboard for signing up for the changing of the guard dinner. If we can pass it around, if you are not already on the list and interested, feel free to put your name on that. You can also sign up on the club website. It's $50 a person, and that will be on your next club bill. We'll add that on there on your next club bill. All right. I think that is it. Or are we getting close to? We're getting there. Yes. So it's the annual Hudson German Society. They do the beer garden on the green. So last year they only do the beer. So we'll be the food provider on the site.
What are those dates again?
August 12th and 13th. So it'll be from 5 o'clock until 10 on Friday the 12th, and then on Saturday it starts at noon and goes till 10 o'clock. So Saturday is the long day. And the society does all the handling of the cash. Everything's a ticketed event, so all we do is collect the tickets and they give us our payout at the end.
We found out how to share it, but we're still not getting the sound, so we'll do this one next week.
All right, we're gonna punt on the scout cabin update. The good news is thanks to Senator Rogner, we were able to get some funding through the state of Ohio. So we've surpassed our fundraising goal for the scout cabin. Now the fun part begins as we start getting to talk to contractors and getting contractors under contract. So that part will all be starting, and Kelly can give us all more of an update on that next week. Dave Basil, would you like to introduce our guests for today?
Good morning, fellow Rotarians and guests. I'm Dave Basil. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We're fortunate today to be able to learn about the Baldwin-Buss House located here in Hudson. It faces the green at the northwest corner of Streetsboro and Main Street in downtown Hudson. Inga Walker, who unfortunately can't join us today because of some family commitments, Don Husat, and Kathy Russell led the charge in 2018 to save the Baldwin-Buss House. Inga Walker is a founder and co-president of the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation, a past Hudson Heritage Association co-president and board member, and has extensive knowledge in historic preservation and design with experience in many projects for Western Reserve Academy. She was the lead designer and historic preservationist for the Academy's President's House renovation in 2017. She's done multiple projects for Old Trail School, including the renovation of the library and the head of the school's office. She has also completed many residential projects with a focus on historic homes. Inga graduated from Western Reserve Academy, has a Bachelor of Arts in Cultural Anthropology from Mount Holyoke College and a Master of Arts in Education from Columbia. She has also completed programs with the School for International Training in Belize and Australia. Don Husat serves as a founder and co-president of the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation. Don is a native of Hudson, a graduate of Western Reserve Academy, and held human resources and corporate communication positions with the B.F. Goodrich Company for 31 years. Thereafter, he established his own consulting firm, serving several major corporations in Northeast Ohio. During his career and following his retirement, Don has dedicated his time to a variety of volunteer endeavors, including service on the boards of Western Reserve Academy, his college alma mater, Washington and Lee University, the Akron Civic Theater, the American Diabetes Association, and Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church. Don also served 9 years on the board of Hudson Heritage Association, 3 of those years as its president or co-president. Don is married to Vasilia and is the father of 2 children and the grandfather of 2. Kathy Russell's interest in historic preservation began 25 years ago when she and her husband purchased an 1824 federal home and began to restore it. Wow, that sounds like an enormous task, Kathy. Learning and listening to experts, hands-on experience, and a library of reference books gave birth to a passion that has only grown with time. Kathy is currently pursuing her master's degree in historic preservation at Ursuline College. Kathy is a native of Michigan, graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Socioeconomics and a Bachelor of Science in Public Affairs Management from Michigan State. She moved to Cleveland while working for Eaton Corporation and then joined McDonald and Company Securities. In 2004, she joined the family-owned business and served as secretary and treasurer of Russell Equipment Company for 12 years. Kathy is actively involved in Hudson, has been for 35 years. She has held various volunteer and leadership roles with local organizations, including Case Barlow Farm, Ride the Rainbow, Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, Hudson Blossoms Women's Committee, Hudson Garden Club, Ballet Under the Stars, and Pioneer Women of the Western Reserve Academy. Most recently, she has served as co-president of Hudson Heritage Association and as treasurer of the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation. Again, please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to Don Husat and Kathy Russell.
I never know where to put this thing, which is why I can never find it when I'm done with it. Good morning, and thank you, David, for the introduction. And thank you very much on behalf of myself, Kathy, and Inga for inviting us to present this morning. This has been an endeavor that's going into its 4th year for the 3 of us. And starting now to, you'll see some activity very, very soon. So we're getting, again, very excited about it and want to really give you some background on how this all came about and why this house is so important to the city of Hudson. Next slide we can start with, I think. The house was built in 1825 and is architecturally significant for quite a few reasons. The Western Reserve Architect magazine in 1929 described the house as you will see here. The iconic pilasters, the pedimented gable, and classic moldings have been executed in such a delicate and refined lines that it presents a pleasing appearance. And that was I.T. Frary, who did the book Early Homes of Ohio in 1936. Described it as one of the finest houses in Hudson. And of course, if you were to look at it today, you would have to question that. But when we're done with it, there will be no question about it. Next slide. This is a picture of the house on the left, of course, the way it was originally, as you just saw in the other photograph. And this is the way the house is today. Now, one of the interesting things about the architecture of this house is that we've through some forensic work, determined that the actual wing, the on the left side of the house, was the original structure. And then the house was built subsequent to that buildings being put up. And we think that wing originally was used either as a retail store, perhaps a feed store, stagecoach stop. It's really not very well documented, but it was, we believe, the original building, and then the house was added again in 1925. Next. In 1813, Stephen Baldwin purchased the land where it sits from Owen Brown. And of course, Baldwin was a business partner with David Hudson, and they acquired that property at that time. In 1825, architect Lemuel Porter and builder Lemuel Porter built the Baldwin-Buss House for Stephen's Baldwin's son, Augustus. And Augustus was a merchant who moved to Hudson from Goshen, Connecticut, and established a business here in town and ran it very successfully for a number of years. In 1856, he sold the house to John Buss. And John Buss is even more well-known in town. I think many of us have become familiar with John Buss and his legacy here. John Buss was a merchant, a banker, justice of the peace, member of the fire department. In essence, whatever needed to be done in town, he pretty much took care of getting done. And so he owned that house until his death in 1856, when Charles Buss acquired the house. He kept the house then until 1907, at which time he sold the property to Charles Marino. And that property, I will add, is about 1 acre in size, and I'll get into that. Kathy and I will in a few minutes. But it's about a 1 acre lot where that house sits. And so he sold that house to Charles Marino. And there were actually two families involved in that, the Marino family and the Carreno family. They had come over from Italy, and they shared that house. My understanding is that the Carrenos lived in the wing on the left side, on the south side, and that the Marinos lived in the main body of the house. Rich Marino was born in 1921. He lived in that house his entire life up until the last year or two of it, and raised his family there. And he was one of a number of children, and I may not have them all listed here, but the ones we know of were his siblings, Art and Fred, both of whom were barbers in town. And they moved around a couple of times with their shops, but one building where they were was where the current Prestige building, if you will, is located for the next few weeks. And then that will be gone. But Art occupied the back shop, and Fred was on the 303 side, and that's where they had their barbershop. Their sister, Minnie Marino, is Minnie Marino Wagner, and of course, Minnie's husband, Leo, started the Reserve Inn. He purchased the Reserve Inn in the early 50s from another family in town that had been operating a restaurant at that time, the Maricolas. And then the Marinos, the Wagners ran that restaurant until Leo passed away. And then Dennis, their son, took it over as the Reserve Inn. And up until 4 or 5 years ago, when Lager and Vine took over the building. So Rich then moved to Connecticut with his step-granddaughter, to whom he transferred the ownership of the property. Rich was beyond the point of being able to take care of himself, so his stepdaughter took him to Connecticut to live with her, and then he passed away in 2016. Next. The house has had sort of a rough time over the last 8 or 9 years. After Rich left, The house sat vacant and with his stepdaughter, the owner of it, or step-granddaughter, owning it in Connecticut, it really did not get much attention at all and began to frankly deteriorate fairly badly. And it, as I mentioned, included the office building and the store. Hudson Heritage at that point, when they saw it starting to deteriorate 2016, 2017, approached the city and expressed concern about it because it was really, it was just becoming an eyesore, and we felt the house was worth saving. And so the city got in touch with the owner, and she came into town and had some minimal work done to try to stabilize the house. So they got rid of some of the, there were abandoned vehicles on the property, and siding was deteriorating, and they got that somewhat taken care of. The other intervening factor, and I don't have the exact year on this, it might have been 2016, the city of Hudson approved plans of a commercial developer to move the house, not off of the property, but elsewhere on the property. And that would then give that developer room to put up some new buildings, commercial buildings, but in essence, encapsulate the house in new construction, which simply would have significantly detracted from the property. And we did not want to see that happen. Fortunately, that developer's plans never materialized, and it again sat for a while untouched. Next. There are two pictures there. If you look at the top picture of that complex of buildings, right at the top there at about 12 o'clock, that's where the house would be if it had been moved, much closer to the red building there, which is the current Prestige building. And you can see all of the other development that would have gone up around it. That never really happened, fortunately. But that did not mean that developers had lost interest in the property either. So next. As I mentioned earlier, the city cited the owner for code violations, and then they were eventually taken care of in the most minimal of ways. In the meantime, First and Main developer Fairmont Properties expressed interest in the property as well for commercial development. And again, that was of concern to Hudson Heritage Association. And at that time, Inga and I were co-presidents of Hudson Heritage, and Kathy, you were the treasurer at that time. And the three of us kind of got together and said, we really can't let this happen. So Hudson Heritage then our board agreed with that and provided a $10,000 grant for a down payment to purchase the entire Marino property. And at that time, we were thinking of trying to raise $3 million to purchase that property and restore the house. Next. In February of 2019, Kathy and Inga and I established the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation, incorporated as a tax-advantaged 501c3, and the Hudson Community Foundation agreed to administer our funds for us. And we launched into a campaign to raise $1.7 million at that time and purchase the property. Then our strategy was at that time, we couldn't raise 3, that didn't seem realistic. Try to raise the 1.7, and then once we had the property, engage in a subsequent campaign to raise the money to restore the house. So we worked with the owner, and she agreed to hold the house off of the market until August of 2019, giving us the opportunity to raise money. And then by the time we got to the end of August, we hadn't gotten to where we needed to be. We convinced her to give us another few months. And so she extended the deadline until November of 2019, at which time she said that either you're going to find a way to buy it or I'm going to put it back on the market. We had raised by December of 2019, $875,000 in round numbers. We had then approached the owner and said, what if we were to buy that house only, subdivide the property, you keep the store, you keep the office building, you can either get the rent money from those, or you can subsequently sell those properties. But in the meantime, we will have the house and we can go ahead and restore it. She did not want to do that. We tried multiple ways to get her convinced to do it, but she just simply said, no, I'm going to sell the whole property. And so, again, we were at the point where felt we were up, against a wall and running out of options. And then one morning, and it's kind of a funny story, Inga was at CVS doing some shopping and her phone rang. And she talked to the person at the other end of the phone, immediately afterwards called me. She said, you'll never guess what happened. She said, Peg's Foundation just called me up and they said they want to buy that property and they would like to build consider at least building their new headquarters on the Merino property and then giving the house to us to restore. They would own it, but it would be up to the Baldwin-Buss House Foundation to use the funds that it had raised to restore the property. And I said, you can't be serious. She said, yeah, absolutely. And it seemed like just, a Christmas gift early, And I have to add here that we need to thank Bill Curran, because earlier in the year, Bill had gotten us in touch with Peg's Foundation and they expressed moderate interest. They weren't really excited about it, but at least they were introduced to it. And then over the next several months, the more they looked at it, the more their board talked about it, the more attractive the idea of building a new headquarters it became to them. And so in December, they said, we're going to go do this. And so we were very, very excited about that. So by 2020, with Peg's Foundation then in the process of purchasing that property, some things began to get in the way. COVID obviously was one of them. The whole world essentially came to a stop. And a lot of things that we had planned on doing, we just simply were not able to do at that time. The other issue, and David, you might be able to shed more light on this than I can, but there was some property ownership issues. Rich's original beverage store was on what is now Park Lane. And of course, the city back in the days of the early development of First and Main needed to move that building so they could extend Park Lane all the way through from Main Street all the way down to Library Street. But Rich's building was in the way. So on a rather, what I understand to be informal basis, the city and Rich got together and the city said, we'll give you some property over here on what's going to become First Street. We can move your store there if you'll give us the property where your store currently is. Okay, fine. Picked up the building, moved it over there, and all was fine and dandy until 2020 when Peg's was in the process of trying to finalize the acquisition of the Merino property, and some of the surveys just didn't match up. And this is where you might be able to clarify for us, but I believe this city council actually had to enact some legislation to transfer property back and forth and get it all taken care of, but it got done. It got done. The city now owns the Park Lane property, and what was city property is now part of the Merino property. So that's where we were at that point. And that same year, Peg's Foundation announced that they were in fact going to build a new headquarters. They've currently been in the Burton D. Morgan Bank building across the street there on 303, and wanted an art gallery to honor Peg Morgan and have a regular headquarters building as well for their mission in mental health. So that's pretty much the chronology and the timeline on this thing. And I'm going to ask Kathy now. She is far more knowledgeable than I am about historic architecture and architecture in general. And I've got to say that between Kathy and Inga, I'm the guy on the block that doesn't really know much about what he's doing. And fortunately, between the three of us, we're able to muddle through this. But Kathy can really explain to you why this house is so architecturally and historically important.
Good morning. I'm going to kind of sail through this architectural information. It is classic Greek Revival style, a style that that gained in popularity in the early 1800s. And basically, it was an expression of America's triumphant sense of destiny and sense that our newly formed nation was a spiritual descendant of Greece and democracy. The character defining features of a Greek Revival house are symmetry, pilasters, columns, a window in the pediment, in this case, a carved lunette, and plain or highly decorated cornices and friezes. They're usually painted white to resemble the white marble of impressive, costly public buildings. Details were bold, but with simple moldings, heavy cornices, gables with pediments, and unadorned friezes were typical. Columns could be either fluted or smooth, but they were almost always built of wood. The Ionic column is typically identified by its capital, which includes large paired spiral scrolls or volutes. Next slide. You'll have to excuse me, but it's a little difficult for me to see this. So you may not, over the past 2 or 3 years, it seems like a lot hasn't been happening, but there has been a lot behind the scenes. PEG's Foundation and Peninsula Architects, Baldwin-Buss House Foundation engaged John Milner Architects out of Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. They're one of the most premier architectural historic preservation firms in the United States, and they have a very, very long resume that's impressive. With their help, we have developed we conducted a historic preservation plan that documented the original architectural features of the house, provides a chronology of changes over time, and then the preservation plan itself actually identifies the methodology of preserving the house. It's not that simple, because what you're basically doing is you're rewiring. First of all, the house wouldn't have had any electrical wiring or plumbing. And so the entire house needs to be upgraded to current code. And so how do you do that sensitively? The easy way is to remove all the plaster and then just feed everything up as though were new construction. But this historic fabric is essential to our mission to preserve it according to the United States Department of Interior standards for rehabilitation, and also to install ductwork sensitively so that you're not, there are very few closets. So channeling even the ductwork up through inconspicuous places is a priority so that it doesn't change the aesthetic of the interior of the home. Also floors, the easy way, of course, is to take a belt sander and stain it and throw some polyurethane on it. But we are supposed to love and embrace the cupping and bowing of almost 200-year-old floors. So a lot of this work is going to be done by hand sanding. And another component of this preservation plan is what to do with the original paint finishes. There is evidence, I don't know how much you know about this, but grain painting was frequently done in the early 1800s, and grain painting was a means of it was faux painting to represent exotic woods. Frequently, it was grain to represent mahogany. So back to the slide. We're restoring the interior and the exterior details to the original. We're complying with the United States Department of Interior standards. And I can't read that, but we're ultimately going to be returning it to the community for public and community use and for exhibits and programs on the Western Reserve architecture and history. And one other thing I wanted to add to what Don had previously said, in November, December, he's correct, we had $875,000 raised, committed for the restoration of the house. But subsequent to that, we also received $150,000 capital grant from the state of Ohio to add to that kitty. And current restoration, oh, you can flip to the next slide, please. Current restoration costs are estimated to be around $1.6 million. So obviously there's a bit of a shortfall between the 1.15 million that Baldwin-Buss House ultimately raised and the 1.6 PEGS Foundation has committed to filling that void from their coffers, which is greatly appreciated. So there shouldn't be any delay in the completion of the restoration of the house. Along with that, PEGS Foundation with Baldwin-Buss House Foundation's encouragement will be creating some type of preservation easement on the property to permanently protect the house and some portion of the land on the 0.92 acre parcel. This was really important to us since we were providing funds to them that this home be preserved in perpetuity and can't be altered in a significant way once the preservation easement is established. This is a picture in 1933. The National Park Service established the Historic American Building Survey. It was founded as a constructive make-work program for architects, draftsmen, and photographers left jobless by the Great Depression. The Baldwin-Buss House was chosen as one of those homes to be documented in that period. And as you can see, they documented the original floor plan and the exterior of the house prior to any additions. And typically they would document it actually as it was. This particular Habs rendering took some artistic license because they removed the front porch, which had already been built at the time that this blueprint was drawn. Next slide, please. And this you saw previously, this was from the Summit County Atlas of 1874. And you can see the house as it originally was built. Next slide. So who was this guy, Lemuel Porter? Lemuel Porter was from Waterbury, Connecticut. He came to Talmadge in 1818, and he was a master builder carpenter of his era. He originally started out as a chair maker. He is the same master builder architect who built the Talmadge Congregational Church, President's House on Western Reserve Academy, and the Whedon Farwell House on Aurora Street. All three are listed in the National Register. I've already touched upon the historic structure report and the preservation plan, so I'm going to skip through that. And next slide, please. These are some of the interior details that are significant. This is the scroll detail on the side of the steps, the newel post, the ionic pilasters, the fan light or lunette, the decorative corner blocks, and part of the Adams style mantle. Next, please. And just to give you a little background, these master builder carpenters, they did not start from scratch. There were many Carpenters Handbooks, which were really the carpenter's Bible in construction. And this is one example. Asher Benjamin is usually the one cited because he's the first person in the United States to have published a book, but there were many, many other manuals that these carpenters could refer to. But just as an example, on the left is a picture of the newel post scroll. And this is a drawing directly from Asher Benjamin's book. So it was a very formulaic type of design, used geometry, and the designs were repeated over and over again throughout multiple houses throughout the United States. Next slide, please. And here's another illustration, again, from Asher Benjamin's book. This is, on the left is the Ionic Capitol from the Baldwin-Buss House, and on the right is the drawing from Asher Benjamin's book. Virtually identical in every way. So when the restoration begins, all the additions that were not original to the house will be removed. In this case, the front porch will be removed and will reveal that beautiful doorway. Can you go back about 3 or 4 slides? One more. More. That one. Okay, so no, back to the doorway. So this is what is hidden behind the front porch. And interestingly enough, you'll see the sandstone step on the entry, and you'll see the 2 wrought iron, cast iron boot scrapers on either side. We actually found this original stone step on the north side of the house. And as evidence, they would mount these boot scrapers in lead to hold them in place. Although the boot scrapers are gone, the sets of holes that would have held these boot scrapers are still in place. And that's how we were able to identify that that was the original step. All right, now you can go back forward about 6 slides. Okay. So these are just some of the exterior details that will require actual paint conservationists to remove the layers of paint and carefully remove them so as not to destroy the actual historic material. Next. These are interior pictures of the house as it is today. It's in pretty rough shape. There's been water damage. Vinyl tile put over the hardwood flooring, all of which will have to be removed and the adhesive removed. Next. Yeah, just a lot of work to be done. You can just quickly go through these. This is how it exists currently today. And one last thing I wanted to say, because you're probably interested in knowing what the schedule is. Peninsula Architects their goal is to have the construction documents and permits set 100% completed by today. And then these plans will be submitted to Summit County, and they estimate that it'll take approximately 4 weeks to get the drawing review and the building permits issued. Welty Construction was chosen by PEGS Foundation after consulting an agreement with Baldwin-Buss House Foundation to do the work, perform the work on the site. And demolition time frame provided by Welty, they believe the demolition will actually begin in about 2 weeks. And the next immediate step that they're working with the city on right now is to establish or set up a stormwater pollution prevention plan. And that's about all that I have. I guess maybe Don will conclude, and if you have any questions.
So as you can see from what Kathy was explaining to you, there's a lot of work to be done. But we're glad that we're finally at the point now where we can begin to do that. There's an aerial view from a drone that we retained a company. And that's the way the house is. And our plan is to periodically get some additional shots so that you can see the progress, not only of the restoration of the house, but the redevelopment of the rest of the property. Next slide. There is this is an architect's rendering, obviously, but this is how we envision the house to look once it's restored. Now, if you look at some of the back pictures, earlier pictures we had up, you will notice that there were dormers on the wing of the house. Those dormers were not original. They will be removed, and the porch there on the wing will be restored to its original configuration. And the matching porch on the west side of the house will be restored as well. It's currently obscured by one of those additions that will be removed. And when that addition is removed, then what you're seeing here on the front will be a mirror image on the backside as well. The landscaping is still a work in progress. It will not look like that as you're seeing there. We want to very much try to replicate the kind of landscaping that would have been done back in that particular era, which meant, among other things, foundation plantings were not used, and things like boxwood and other kinds of greenery of that type would be considered to be used instead. So, next picture. Have any of you ever been over to the Peter Allen Inn, or are you familiar with it in Kinsman, Ohio? It is not by Lemuel Porter. It's another architect that did this, but it gives you an idea of how they all worked out of pattern books long before Ryan Holmes ever came along. And but they had similar kinds of architectural features. And this Peter Allen Inn was in even worse shape than the Baldwin-Buss House is now. And it was purchased by a local foundation in Kinsman. It has been restored. It is now a bed and breakfast. And then what you can't see on the back, down at a lower elevation, is a restaurant that was attached to it, and another large building off to the side for a wedding venue. And we don't plan to get into anything like that. But the important thing is, when you look at this house, every time I see it, I look across the green when I'm downtown, and I picture that house on our green. And that's pretty much what it's going to look like when we're done with our restoration project as well. So I think it's going to be something that people in Hudson can be very proud of. It's going to really transform the south end of Main Street. And I think we're just looking forward to it. So thank you all very much. If you have questions between Kathy, do you have time for any questions? Yeah, okay.
Thank you both for coming. You said what is not going to be done with the house. Could you talk about what will be done with the house publicly once it's completed?
That's still a work in progress. That's a question we got from the very first time we started raising money. What are you going to do with it? And it is still evolving. It clearly is going to be a community use facility. It was suggested we ought to turn it into a restaurant. We ought to turn it into a bed and breakfast. We've had all kinds of suggestions like that. But I think part of the grant from the state of Ohio stipulates that it has to be used for educational purposes and for cultural endeavors as well. So, you know, we could have art displays in there. We could have educational programs in there, whether on Western Reserve architecture or any other kinds of subjects. We also could be renting out the room in there, or the rooms in there for use for small gatherings. You know, somebody wants to have a small reception for an engagement party, a graduation, whatever. We figure we can raise some money by making it available for those purposes as well. But primarily, it's going to be a cultural facility.
Actually, you might have answered this, but with the various ways you're going to use the building, but are you also creating a fund for the ongoing maintenance of the building? Because I understand old buildings take some maintenance too.
We're working with PEGS on that. We're going to have to obviously be able to maintain that over time. And right now we're just trying to figure out exactly what we're going to have when we're all done with it. And then whether we can get an endowment, I'm not sure. Kathy, she's the treasurer.
Yeah,
And I'm
well,
certain
I-
you'd welcome donations from
Sure,
Rotarians.
anything you want to pass our way. The good thing is that this house is going to be renovated from top to bottom. And yes, there will be ongoing maintenance costs, but the major expense, any major expenses, because of the extent of the work that is being done, we can't see anything big coming down the pike for at least 15 or 20 years once things start aging. So as Don said, the exact arrangements for maintenance and operating are still being worked out with PEG's Foundation.
Kathy and Don, thank you so much for coming today. My family has lived here since, well, about 62 years now in Hudson, and it constantly amazes me of the three things that come together that really make this community, and you're seeing it here today. One is the community itself really cares for the community. The second ingredient is the role that philanthropy plays in making things happen. This thing would not have happened had not you taken the initiative and then also the PEG's Foundation coming on board for this. The third ingredient, which is the passion of people like you too, and other members of your team, that take the leadership on this thing and make it happen. And God love you for doing it, because we have a better community for it. I see it coming here today on this. I see it coming forward on the 1927 building. It just amazes me. And I'm so proud of this community. And thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you, Bill. It's a passion. I was born and raised in this town, and well, technically born in Akron, but I've raised in this town all my life. And really just have always felt like it's such a beautiful place, and I hated to see it deteriorate. And so, yeah.
Admired the building for a long time. The outside of the building, you can look through the porch, you can look past the additions that went on later on, but you can see the bones are really there, and it's just a magnificent building. And I do remember, Ron, are you still here? I think we used to back, maybe Ron Strobel isn't here, but we used to have Hudson Heritage Club Association meetings back in the addition, or in the, I guess you'd call that the addition to the left. And it was a little rough back then. I'm sure it still is. I doubt that Mr. Marino made a lot of changes to that, but it will be just magnificent when it's done. Congratulations. By the way, Jim, we're each good for what, 20 minutes worth of sanding on the poplar floors if you want, or?
When we were going through the house, one of the remnants left behind was, it was in two pieces, but it was a sign that said Hudson Heritage Association. Their offices, I remember, were in that building at one point. In fact, that wing was used for a variety of different offices over time. And there's virtually nothing original left in the South L there. It's just, except, old drywall is about the best you're going to get in terms of anything antique in there. So.
I also just wanted to say one last thing. We've made a big deal about our hard work, which has been a lot of hard work, and the generosity of PEG's Foundation. But looking out at this audience, I see several of our donors too, out of 300 and some donors who helped make this project possible. And we were, we had a very short time frame, but the generous donations and the people who followed through on those donations were huge, and we are very grateful for that.
Raised that $800,000 in what, about 8 or 9 months?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Thank you very much, Don and Kathy, for your program today. As you go downtown, you're starting to see the barricades and those kind of things going up around the building. So I thought it was great timing. And that aerial shot that you saw of the cabin or of the house, we will be just in front of that on towards Main Street, where we'll be having the Beer Garden Festival in August. So we're going to be right in front of the Baldwin-Buss House for the beer garden area. So we'll have an opportunity to see it up and close in August if you don't get a chance to see it before then. All right, so we have the Rotabuck raffle. And today's take is $11. And if you go and fill up your gas tank, you could probably get 2 gallons of gas for that. Today, don't go tomorrow because it might be more than that by tomorrow. So Don, I'm gonna come down and let you pick a number. Thank you. All right. So the take today is $11, but the jackpot is $499. So the jackpot is getting up there. Winning ticket 717-828, 717-828. Oh, I was hoping Tom would win it because Ed? Father Joe. All right. It's in there. It is not the black marble. Oh, here's the take. All right. So you only have 3 more weeks of dad jokes left. So I had to dig deep for this one. All right. So what is the tallest building? What is the tallest building in the world? The library. It's full of stories.